G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to War Thunder with Mags. So, since the drop of patch 1.55, I have been inundated with emails talking about this particular aircraft, and I finally decided to relent and take a look at it. This is the dual 40mm armed Ki-44-2 Otsu. This aircraft is Era 2, battle rating 2.3. It comes armed with two 12.7mm Ho 103 machine guns with 500 rounds of ammunition, and two Ho 301 40mm cannons with 20 rounds of ammunition. That's 10 rounds of ammunition per gun. Now, the machine guns have a full collection of ammunition belts for you to choose from. Today I'm using air target belts. The 40mm cannons have absolutely no option in regards to ammunition selection. They always come loaded with a default high explosive fragmentation incendiary tracer round. Now, the Ho 301 is actually a very interesting cannon. It has what is possibly the slowest muzzle velocity of any cannon in War Thunder. At 805 feet per second, this cannon has less than half the muzzle velocity of the Machine Cannon 108 fitted to the ME-262, a weapon that is notoriously known for its poor muzzle velocity. That poor muzzle velocity means the effective range of these cannons is only around 150 meters in combat. It has a rate of fire of 475 rounds per minute. With only 20 rounds, 10 per gun, that means you have less than 2 seconds burst time on these cannons before they're out. So the guns sound pretty poor. Why the hell would you want a plane with these things attached? That's why. In every metric, these are the worst cannons in the game. Slow firing, they have poor velocity. The wide position of the cannons on the wings means that at its maximum effective range of 150 meters, it's actually quite difficult to get both guns on a single target at the same time. And they shotgun if you try and fire at range. They are not accurate in the slightest. They drift all over the sky in front of your aircraft. But if you get to point blank range and pull the trigger on a target, they will decimate it, regardless of what it is. Trigger-happy pilots will only get one burst out of these guns. It's as simple as that. If you're very careful on your trigger, you may be able to stretch it out to 2 or 3. Although your last shot, as you'll see here, I missed this pass with the cannons, and I'm only left with 2 rounds. Lining up on the target, triggers away, I tap the wing with the 50 cals, but the cannons just don't go to target. Poor aiming on my behalf, I should have waited till I was closer, and I've got 2 shells left in the gun. Unless I'm really lucky with these guns now, I'm down to the 50 cals. So just looping back around to re-engage the Hurricane, closing distance fast, pull the trigger, and you'll see how far away the two 40mm cannon shells went from the line of tracers from the 50 caliber machine guns. They're not even close. You've got to fire this thing at point blank range. So with the 40mm cannons emptied, what's the rest of the plane like? Well, there's nothing really to report. If you've flown a Ki-44 from the Japanese tree, you've flown this plane already. It's fast for its battle rating, it's manoeuvrable, it's no zero, but it is not bad at all. Good energy retention, good dive rate, decent roll rate, not particularly durable, so you want to avoid getting shot in it if at all possible. It's a Ki-44, almost identical to the ones that are in the main tree. The guns themselves in the wings, once you've expended the ammunition, don't seem to affect the plane's performance all that much, although that's not particularly surprising in this case. Part of the reason why the Ho 301s were used in the Ki-44s is they only weigh 49 kilograms each. To put that into perspective, your average Browning 50 caliber machine gun set up for an aircraft comes in at around 40 kilos. The Ho 301 is just an incredibly small, incredibly light 40mm cannon. Comparing it against the Ki-44s that are already in the tree, once the 40mm ammunition on this particular aircraft has been expended, while overall performance of the plane is virtually identical, it's actually slightly at a disadvantage. The two equivalent aircraft have either dual 50 caliber machine guns and dual 7.7mm machine guns, or it has quad 50 caliber machine guns. As strange as this will sound, as a 40mm armed aircraft, once you have pulled the trigger for longer than 2 seconds, it's actually underarmed in comparison to what you would normally have available in the tree. To me, this gives this aircraft the feeling of novelty aircraft is not really the right way to describe it, because it is a good plane and it can be used effectively even once the 40mm cannons are out. I would say a very new player friendly premium. If you know what you're doing with it, even with just the 250 cals, you'll be able to score very well on the scoreboard with this plane. And obviously those dual 40s basically guarantee you a kill at the start. This is a plane that even somebody who's inexperienced in flying in War Thunder realistic battles should be able to get this thing close enough to a target and pull the trigger once, guaranteeing them a single kill at the very least per match. Now that's of course against fighter versus fighter, but what about bombers? This plane is probably the best bomber interceptor that Japan has in Lower Era 2. Providing the battle rating of your match is below 2.7, Japan actually has very few aircraft that have a very good strike capability against large armoured bombers. Aircraft like the Catalina, the Blenheim, the Beaufort, the TB3 if somebody brings that out. Now you wouldn't think of these aircraft as being particularly well armoured under a normal case, but when your aircraft's primary weaponry is only 30 caliber machine guns, killing something like a Catalina can actually be quite difficult, especially when it's spraying defensive fire back in your position. I think that's the other area where this particular aircraft is going to excel, using that very limited 20 rounds of 40mm ammunition to eliminate enemy bombers without having to expose itself to sustained bomber defensive fire. But I would consider this to be sort of a niche role. Bomber spam is not really that much of a problem from what I've seen at the low tiers most of the time anyway, so using the aircraft as a dedicated bomber hunter, it could potentially be a waste. That'll come down to the opinions of the pilot, of course. Personally, I would be hunting fighters with it. And so it comes down to the end of the match. At the moment it's me and a second Ki-44 versus this P400. Smart pilot, he's opening the distance, he's not trying to engage in a sustained turn fight. He's not actually trying to outrun us at the moment, he's trying to get an altitude advantage so he can turn back and actually boom and zoom our aircraft. So I throw the Ki-44 in a climb and start pacing him. I'm not going to allow him to take an altitude advantage. Now, the temperatures on the Ki-44, it does overheat its water and its oil rather quickly, especially when you're running sustained WEP. However, like most of the Ki-44s in the tree, pulling back off the throttle for just a couple of seconds will generally cool the oil and water down almost instantly, push the throttles back to maximum, and you're good to go for another couple of minutes before you get the overheat timer again. Providing you're always aware of the condition of your oil and water, it never poses a problem in combat. Just pick your times. As I've said in the past, I find usually the best times, unless it's an absolute emergency, is to pull back on the throttles right when you're in the middle of a rollover to dive on an enemy aircraft, because you can begin your dive accelerating towards the target, picking up airspeed, cooling your aircraft more quickly without actually having the engine running at 100% at the same time. This gives you better control in your dive and more rapidly cools your engine. So the P400 has made his turn back, he's closing in fast, down under a kilometre, just tracking him. As he turns in to make his pass, turn hard into his dive. This will cause him to overshoot before he can get guns on target. He can't turn that quickly in a dive. Loop the plane over, little bit of combat flap just to turn the plane around more quickly. Go through to WEP, nose down, and the chase begins. Missing that pass and continuing the dive, not aborting and going back for altitude, has pretty much guaranteed that the P400 is not going to hold the altitude advantage or the energy advantage for the rest of this fight. At this point, I just maintain a nice smooth dive, no reason to dive any sharper than this. Either the Ki-44 in front of me is going to take the P400 out, or I'm going to have the highest energy state, I'm going to pass him, intercept and destroy the P400. In either case, now the battle is won, so there's no point in doing anything stupid. Now the P400 is trying to find a way of defending himself, he's heading straight in for the cargo ships, and I hate the cargo ships. But it doesn't matter. That shot there was the shot that killed him. His aircraft has suffered critical damage of the elevator and the rudder. He still has some control, but not a great deal. Now from this point it should be simple to just drop in and shoot his plane down, but he has managed to make it to the cargo ships, so I'm spending more time watching where the tracer fire from the ship is coming in than watching him, which is why I missed this shot. That was a perfect position for me to execute the target, and I just failed to hit. And you can see why. Look at the flak fire coming off these cargo ships. The cargo ships are actually more dangerous than the runway AAA most of the time. But again, this doesn't really matter. If you look at the aircraft, you can see he's struggling to keep it in the air. He's lost almost all his control. Take the lead, put a couple of shots in as I go past, but he can't keep it out of the water. And into the drink he goes, and there's my third kill and the end of the match. So, what do I think of the plane? Well, I think it's quite a good little aircraft. The Ki-44s have been good planes for the last two patches. They are quite fun to fly, they're very good in combat. Do I think it's overpowered with the dual 40mm? No. This aircraft fights planes that are armed with 20mm and 37mm cannons and can sustain fire with large amounts of ammunition for an entire match without landing. This thing gets 20 shots, 10 per gun, and it can unload all of them in under 2 seconds. It unloads its ammunition so quickly that you actually can't jam the 40mm. They simply don't have enough ammunition for you to be able to overheat them. Now, it would be overpowered if it had more ammunition than it actually had, but that restriction to 20 shots only, which is actually historically accurate. Those cannons were fed via 10-round clips. So, with only that ammunition available, or that limited amount of ammunition available, I don't think the plane is going to cause too many problems. As I said earlier on, I think it's probably a fairly new player-friendly aircraft. It's a plane that anybody should be able to get at least one kill in, which is encouraging to low-end players. An experienced player will take it out and get more, of course, but an experienced player could take any aircraft in 2.3 and have a 3, 4, 5 kill match. Once you start throwing experience into the mix, the 40mm cannons are truly irrelevant. Experienced pilots will do well regardless of what they're flying. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.